This is Amanda Dawn Christie telling you that if you're interested in radio, AM, FM, shortwave, amateur radio, pirate broadcasting, and more, you won't want to miss the International Radio Report every Sunday morning at 10:30 on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal and online at ckut.ca.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. My name's Sheldon, and Gilles is here with me as usual. We welcome you to our half-hour visit every Sunday. 30 minutes of news and information from the world of radio for you. We invite you to contact us by email. radioreport@yahoo.com is our email address. We're live streaming and archived at ckut.ca, the website for CKUT Radio in Montreal. And we have our Facebook group. It's called International Radio Report. We have 610 members, and we welcome one new member this week. His name is Bashir. Thank you for joining us. And our ever-growing in popularity YouTube channel is available at youtube.com/International Radio Report. We're up to 398 subscribers. Every show that we do is posted up there within an hour or so after the show airs on CKUT. So you can go back and check out previous shows that are stored there on the YouTube channel. And from time to time, we have special broadcasts that we put up exclusively on the YouTube channel. So you find that again at youtube.com/International Radio Report. So we have a lot of stories and lots of things going on internationally that have a radio connection. So we will take you around the world today in today's broadcast. And as usual, we'll wrap things up with some upcoming ham radio contests and events, including a very special one that's coming up next weekend. So stay tuned for that. We start off first, though, down in Texas. And I'm wondering with the way commercial radio is going these days, if we might be getting more stories like this, given COVID, given the state of broadcast radio these days. The headline is 11 Texas radio stations face license expiration. FCC issues a reminder that renewal applications are not in hand. It comes from Paul McLean in Radio World. There are 11 radio stations in Texas that face the loss of their licenses if they fail to apply for renewal by the end of the month. They include 3 full-service FM stations, 3 AMs, and 5 low-powered FMs. The FCC released the station list that it says haven't filed yet. Their licenses will expire as of August the 1st, 2021, provided no renewal application is received by midnight on the date of the expiration. And it's quite widespread. I won't go through all the call letters, but cities where these stations exist: Borger, Conroe, Corpus Christi, Freer, Killeen, Los Ibanez, Mission, New Boston, Odessa, Plains, and San Antonio. I would think if they've come this close to the end of their license and haven't reapplied by now, chances are they're not going to be hearing from these radio stations, and they just may be shutting down for whatever reasons, financial or staffing or just it's time to go. It's really odd to see 11 in one state alone.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was actually comparing and looking at the fact that it's 3 FM, but the other ones, low powered, and we know that AM stations, a lot of them have a hard time lately. So when you look at that, you're thinking, wow, it's probably they're thinking, look, it's not worth continuing. Probably short on cash and short on advertisement or whatever keeps them going on. But obviously, it is kind of interesting to see that, they're just not saying anything. I looked at a couple of websites of these stations, which has no information or anything indicating they would leave. So that also is kind of weird. I'm like, well, shouldn't you guys tell your listeners that we're going to be leaving on this date?
Yeah, I guess, what happens when August 1st shows up and they haven't renewed? Who pulls the plug? Or, does the FCC show up and, make sure they're off the air or what? I really don't know how this works, because normally by now, if you were going to go off and not renew, you would tell them and say,
Yeah.
look, okay, we're done. They've obviously received notices from the FCC. You'd think they would answer one way or the other.
I would guess.
But anyways, we'll see if we hear anything further about this. The deadline is coming up very quickly, and as I said, I think we might be seeing a little more of this happening in the months ahead as licenses come up, and particularly these low-powered FM.
Yeah.
A lot of these people might have thought, "Hey, what a great idea! Let's start a low-powered FM radio station." Then they found out that it was work, and there were things you had to do, and reports that had to be filed, and logs that had to be kept, and all that stuff that goes along with having a radio license. So those I can understand. Maybe the people lost interest and whatever, but regular AM and FM stations, that's maybe a different story.
Yeah, I'd be less surprised on AM side, because we know that AM is struggling more than FM. It's weird that they haven't said anything yet, though.
Exactly. Okay, we go next over to Europe, and the European Broadcasting Union has been doing some research into the state of radio over there.
Yep, the European Broadcasting Union finds that radio is in the air, and this is by David Fernandez Quijada from Radio World. And these days of flashy audio innovations with professionals, the trade press, and dedicated events and conferences often focusing on podcasts, vocal assistants, and social audio, we tend to forget the central role that old-fashioned and resilient broadcast radio plays in people's lives. At the EBU, we estimate that broadcast radio still represents between 85 and 90% of total radio consumption, which remains the bulk of audio consumption. To understand the situation of broadcast radio, we have recently conducted research on the distribution networks used by radio services in Europe, Northern African territories that form part of the EEBU. 56 countries with a total population of more than 1 billion people. Many readers will no doubt be surprised to learn that our census found more than 12,000 radio services across the area. There are services operating each under their own brand, independently from the number of frequencies or transmitters. Less surprisingly, 95% of those services broadcast in FM. This sends out a strong signal showing how prevalent FM remains. Of course, the picture on the ground is more diverse, from Southern Europe, where dials are typically overcrowded, to Algeria, the sole remaining public radio monopoly in the area, and on to Norway, the only country to have shut down analog FM radio nationwide. Although some countries still grant FM licenses, the total number of services in this band is on the decrease. The future looks darker for other analog networks, medium and long wave. There are already 19 countries with no medium wave services, although the UK still operates 69 services in that band, nearly as many as all 27 countries of the European Union taken together, where 74 services were identified. There are only 12 services available in long wave, down from 21 in 2017 and 18 in 2019. These originate in 10 countries, with public radio in Algeria and Iceland broadcasting 2 different signals. The long wave band is only used for radio in Region 1 of the ITU and outside the area covered by our study in Mongolia and Turkmenistan. As the reader may guess, digital radio broadcast networks are the fastest growing. In 2021, nearly 2,000 different services were identified, a 23% increase in only 2 years, with no sign of slowing down short term. Again, the UK is an outlier here, with 80% of the 265 DAB stations identified. Meanwhile, DAB Plus continues gaining ground. And what about international radio? More shortwave services are appearing, but often at high cost. Large, well-known broadcasters are turning away from a bandwidth that is increasingly being taken over by religious stations, and other niche services. DRM, for its part, has not been embraced as far as a viable digital alternative to shortwave. So this is interesting. It shows that radio is important. It is interesting to see that FM radio is really the dominant radio service that people go to, which is not surprising. I mean, even here locally, everywhere around the world, I'm not surprised that FM radio is appealing to everybody. It is interesting to see the increase in digital broadcasting, and I think that's going to continue on depending on the countries where you are. There are some countries that want to push digital to the max and make sure that they can replace eventually the analog services. Shortwave, well, I'm not surprised that shortwave is a tough one. It is something that is very unique, and like they say, it's high cost. It costs a lot of money to have all of these transmitters, the land for the antennas, and operate such a service. For how many listeners, actually, also, which is a tough one. It's not like FM radio where you got ratings and you know how many people are actually listening. Shortwave is, I'm out there, but who is actually listening? Unfortunately, lots of religious stuff happening on shortwave, and I don't think that is necessarily the good thing when you turn on that radio and you don't hear anything else than those stations. DRM, which I'm personally, DRM is something that should actually be abandoned from shortwave. I can't see that thing ever taking on, and especially with the lack of any receivers that is at a decent price being able to listen to this. I don't see this as a shortwave savior, that's for sure. And then the long-wave AM stations also, long-wave. I mean, look at that. Just from 2019 to today, the drop already from 18 to 12. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. The shortwave services that they're talking about appearing, so many of them are sort of very specialized services targeting a certain area of the world where there's maybe conflict or upheaval or something going on. But those services are being generated from a couple major transmitter sites. So it's not like brand new stations are being put on, installations are being put on the air, but stations using existing hardware, be it WRMI, be it these other sites in Europe that are being used for leasing out time, basically. So in that respect, it's economical in that a station doesn't have to have the hardware. It just has to have some cash to purchase some airtime. So that's an effective use, I think, of shortwave, where you don't have to have all of that expense for your own equipment, but you can piggyback off of a service that exists out there.
And it's nice to have those because, like you said, it's economical. That means a lot of stations and broadcasters that might not have the money anymore to maintain their own service probably do have the money to pay to be on some other transmitters and not have to take care of the transmitters and have engineers and all of that. So that is definitely probably a way that shortwave will continue working in the future, having a limited amount of international broadcast sites, but that will be used by a lot of broadcasters and rented airtime.
Yeah, I think we've seen signs of that happening already, and I think, as you said, we'll probably be seeing more of that in the future.
Yep.
Another area of the planet going through some difficult times right now is Cuba, and there's a radio connection to all of this, and a number of reports have been circulating. Certainly unrest in Cuba as the anti-government protests are beginning in the streets. So people began immediately, this is a country where we have access to a national broadcaster, Radio Havana, Cuba, of course. Yeah. So people were checking in with that. And we also have the U.S. funded and operated Radio Marti, which broadcasts programming into Cuba from a U.S. perspective. So the U.S. has extended broadcasts of Radio Marti from July the 12th on shortwave, running now from 0400 to 1000 UTC on 6030, 7335, and 7435. People monitoring Radio Havana, Cuba on shortwave have indicated that they are not reporting on the demonstrations, but stories relating to the events are appearing on the Radio Havana, Cuba website regularly. You can check that out at radiohc.cu. Another interesting development, and honestly, I don't remember something like this having happened before.
Yeah.
There are many reports coming in saying that there is jamming taking place on the amateur radio 40-meter band. This is the beginning to show up on social media, YouTube reports, Instagram postings, what have you. And Ryan Elgood reported to World of Radio that he says, from my monitoring this evening, most of the jamming seems to be in the extra class section of the 40-meter band between 7110 up to around 7160. 7133 is targeted and seems to be a popular South Florida Spanish frequency. Now, we know that there are a lot of Cubans who left Cuba, settled in the United States. There's a huge Cuban community in Florida in particular.
Yeah.
There's many clandestine radio broadcasts, and they're able to hear Cuban radio broadcasts in Florida. And, it's a very short distance between Florida and Cuba. Jamming the ham bands, though, this is interesting. Are they jamming these South Florida Spanish-speaking people because they feel they may be communicating with hams in Cuba? We know there are hams in Cuba. Is this how news is getting in or out, possibly, and this is why it's being jammed? Who's doing the jamming? That's not really clear right now, but it's certainly a unique case that I don't remember this sort of thing happening in the past.
And it's very limited. I mean, with all of the frequencies of the ham bands making it to Cuba, especially if we talk from South Florida, even 80 meters would make it really well. It's very limited. It's as almost as they're targeting something that they know exists, that maybe around that range there are a couple of Spanish speaking hams that might be in some way related to, giving out news or talking about what's happening a little more. I have heard the jamming. I looked at the videos that they posted. It does really sound like Cuban jamming. When I compare it to the Radio Marti jamming that I hear, it definitely has the same sound. Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe. I was also thinking, it was like, did we pinpoint it coming really from Cuba itself also? Because I know it's difficult for them to often, just tune a transmitter to another frequency for jamming. But it's possible, but it is kind of interesting and very limited when you look at that. I've monitored Radio Havana, Cuba this week. Of course, they just have they maybe have a little more intense anti-American rhetoric, let's say, this week. And maybe one of the things that I've noted, that the way they talk about it is more into the people that are protesting, but in favor of the revolution. So it's kind of their way of, talking about it. Has a little feel of the Cold War times when you listen to that. One thing also to note for Cubans, actually, which is interesting, the Cuban population, they shut down the internet and they shut down social media. And this reminds me of something we talk about all the time on the show. Shortwave is important because you just have a great example here of some, social unrest in a country that needs to have the news of what's happening. The only way to get it, shortwave radio. Listening to some of the stations that are broadcasting that might give them news. BBC has been having a pretty good coverage of what's happening over there. I listened this week. 2 frequencies to note for those that want to listen in at least Eastern North America. From 0 to 01 UT, 9575 is really good. That one is from the Wolverton, UK transmitter site. And the other time that is coming in really well, and this one has been making it pretty much across North America, but it's later in the evening, from 04 to 05 UT on 9915, and this is from the Madagascar relay, but it's been really packing a great signal. And they've been talking a lot about it, so it's kind of a nice news source for some of the events happening right now in Cuba.
Yeah, there's probably Spanish language broadcasts that Cubans could be picking up as well, coming from other countries that would have some information. You know, there's been a long-standing radio war going on between the United States and Cuba.
Yeah.
If you're down in the southern states, in Florida in particular, the AM broadcast band is saturated with Cuban signals. It's almost like they use their radio stations as jammers.
Pretty much.
Just not using jamming sound, but using just bombarding the frequencies, sometimes walking over American licensed stations on the same frequencies. So yeah, this is nothing new with the radio war that goes on between the two countries, and certainly Radio Marti, Television Marti that they had that's operating as well. So this is kind of sort of brought up the temperature a little bit here now with these protests going on in Cuba. So we're going to be hearing a lot more about this, but definitely, check them out on shortwave, see what Cuba's putting out. The website definitely has different stuff than the broadcasts do, so you can check out the website again. That's radiohc.cu. For Radio Havana Cuba's shortwave broadcaster. And that, of course, is a government-run operation.
Yep, absolutely. So what has been happening with our sun this week? Well, one of the things we talked about last week, which was a coronal hole sending out some solar wind, they were expecting that to arrive around Sunday of last week. During the show, or maybe Monday, but it arrived much later. It actually arrived on Wednesday and created some geomagnetic unrest. It actually went almost to minor storm level at some point, but it didn't last long. There's some interesting activity on the sun. There's a sunspot on the far side of the sun that has been actually having a lot of solar flares from what we see. And we think it's the sunspot that gave a X flare a couple of weeks ago that is on the far side right now. It's interesting because one of the far side explosions actually touched Earth. So it happened on July 13th, and the debris emerged in a circular cloud known as a halo CME. When space weather forecasters foresaw the explosion, there was a moment of excitement. It appeared to be heading towards the Earth. However, the data showed that it was actually a far side event. But the interesting part is, although the explosion occurred on the far side, separated from Earth by the massive body of the sun, it still peppered our planet with high energy particles. So this is kind of interesting. What's going to happen in the week ahead? So we have 3 sunspot groups right now. Pretty quiet though. And there's no real coronal holes or anything for now. K-index, as we're recording the show, is around 1, which is very quiet. And the solar flux around 75. So activity seems to be quiet for the week ahead. But like I say always, quiet on the sun can change from hour to hour or day to day. So the best thing to do is to turn on that radio and listen.
This is Janice of Dorval. The International Radio Report presents 30 minutes of news, information, and commentary on developments in the world of radio every Sunday morning at 10:30 on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal and online at ckut.ca.
All right, so we did have a couple other stories that we wanted to bring to your attention this week, but time is running quickly, and we would like to get into them in a little more depth, so we're going to carry them over. One is about the VOA's Bangla language service ending, and the other one, some violent demonstrations in South Africa that are affecting a number of radio stations down there. So we're going to hold those stories over, and we'll give them more detail and more coverage next week. What we do want to tell you about before we run out of time here today is the upcoming events on ham radio. And there's one major one which we'd like to tell you about coming up on the weekend. It's the sponsored by the Radio Society of Great Britain, and it's the Islands on the Air contest. It's running from 1200 Zulu July 24th to 1200 Zulu July 25th. Now, this is a big event around the world, and it's focused on this particular contest, but IOTA Islands on the Air goes on year-round. People hunt these down to try to work these islands the same way they try to work all the different countries. Yeah. So the RSGB IOTA contest is one of the most popular contests of the RSGB's HF contest calendar, attracting entries from around the world. IOTA refers to the RSGB's Islands on the Air Awards, a newcomer's guide to the system of IOTA references, and further information on the IOTA contest can be found on the IOTA contest information page and on the IOTA contest FAQ page. A beginner's guide to operating is found there as well. The objective of this event is to promote contact between stations in the IOTA Islands group and the rest of the world, and to encourage expeditions to these islands. So this is going to be running on 3.5, 7, 14, 21, and 28 megahertz. It's CW and or SSB, and we'll put a link to the site. And you should really go and check this site out, because there are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these islands that have a designator. Each island is assigned a number by IOTA, and countries try to work, hams try to work as many of these islands as they can. And a lot of these islands are not regularly activated until this particular contest. So you're going to hear a lot of very odd places. You might be referencing your maps quite closely to figure out just where some of these places are. So we'll put a link up to the website, and you can go and check this out. But it is a lot of fun, a lot of really interesting, strange little places that hams get in a boat and get out there and set up a station, and away they go. So a lot of fun coming up next weekend for that contest.
Islands that you never hear. And I don't know if it's because this event is coming up, but I noticed in the clusters while looking for ham stations that there were a lot more different islands. Actually, I was surprised this week of a ton of little islands that was like, where is that exactly? So yeah. I don't know if it's maybe they're starting, some stations already have started in the run-up going to the contest, but it's always fun to monitor these. There's the ARS Flight of the Bumblebees, 17 Zulu to 21 Zulu, July 25th, sponsored by the Adventure Radio Society. Who can play? Both home-based and portable operations are encouraged. What qualifies as a bumblebee? Participants who operate portable from field locations are designated as bumblebees. They get to their operating sites principally under their own power by walking, biking, boating, and so on. The distance traveled to the site is at the bumblebee's discretion. Bumblebees add /BB to their calls. Note, home-based stations do not add /BB to their call sign. Maximum power output, 5 watts. So this is low power, or QRP. Bands, CW on 40, 20, 15, and 10 meters around the standard QRP frequencies.
Yeah, so that's, I'd never heard of this one before, yeah, but nice. It sounds kind of fun.
Yep, absolutely.
People heading out there setting up bumblebee stations, so I give that a listen as well. All right, that is going to do it for us today. We thank you for tuning in. If you have any interesting stories you want to pass along to us, please do so either through our Facebook group, International Radio Report, or email them into us, radioreport@yahoo.com. We will do it all again next Sunday morning. Hope you can tune in then. You've been listening to the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye-bye.